when the person has a vision of something from a vantage point outside their body that is occurring during the time that there's no brain functioning, and when we can validate the timestamp of when the event happened. Those are more difficult to come by because imagine cardiac arrest, for example. Many people in cardiac arrest, they die. Some are resuscitated. And of those who are resuscitated, the researchers find that about 20% recall a near-death experience. So 80% of the people who survive don't remember anything. It's a small number of people who do, and it should be 0% under the conventional neuroscientific perspective. So the fact that it's 20% is really significant. And then of those 20, you need someone to see something in the room where we can timestamp the event and show that it happened during the time that the brain was off, not before, not after, which is sometimes the counter-argument. There was a study in 2014 in Resuscitation Journal by Dr. Sam Parnia, where one of the patients who survived cardiac arrest and remembered a near-death experience talked about some of the doctors in the room, and he talked about a sound that the machine that he heard in the room. He said he heard the sound shock the patient repeatedly. That was the sound the defibrillator made. And they know when it made that sound, and they know what his physiology was, because it was all being measured. And it happened during the time cardiac arrest. So cases like that are extremely difficult to explain under the conventional model. What these cases suggest is that there is a functional consciousness with a non-functional body. A consciousness that is functioning independently of the body. And in these cases, the consciousness is actually enriched. People talk about omnidirectional vision. And in fact, in the book I talk about people who have been blind since birth who have some of these experiences. There are cases of that where they see in their out-of-body experience. Visually, that's what they describe. They come back into their body and they go back to being blind. So there's something about getting the brain out of the way, as I was saying earlier. The brain is kind of getting in the way. It's almost like a blindfold. And when we have these experiences, like a near-death experience, when the brain gets out of the way, the broader reality is somehow revealed. That's what the near-death experience suggests. One other point on that, on the brain as kind of a hallucinating mechanism, which is what some people argue, is that this is still somehow a hallucination that's caused by a dying brain, even though there are a few anecdotes out there. It's what the brain creates when it's dying. That becomes even more difficult to claim in what's known as the shared death experience. The shared death experience is when a person in the room who is not sick, a bystander, shares in the near-death experience with the person who's dying. Sometimes they co-live the life review that the person who's dying is having. So that person is completely healthy. There's no dying brain to be hallucinating. So I think when one examines the data very closely and then looks at some of the arguments, well, it's oxygen deprivation, or it's the psychedelic substance that we naturally create called DMT, or these various chemicals, what you find is that many of the chemicals cannot explain all the elements of the near-death experience. And the chemicals, if they're working in a brain that's off, there's nothing for them to even act on. And then combined with the veridical out-of-body experience, the shared death experience, the much more parsimonious explanation is that the consciousness is existing when the body's off, that the brain is not producing it.